It is rumored that a contestant became a black bear's lunch during filming, which kept the show's content shelved. Is this really true? Let's set out with 10 pieces of equipment. The challenge takes place on Vancouver Island in the Eastern Pacific. 10 survival experts from around the world will be dropped off at different locations on the island. With only 10 designated tools in hand, they will engage in a wilderness survival showdown. The last one standing will win a cash prize of $500,000. As the dinghy slowly departs, the 10 are dropped at their respective starting points. The first contestant, Josh, watches the crew leave. Too nervous to put his feelings into words, he just hopes to safely return home. After a quick inventory check, Josh plans to set up his shelter first. He ties a rope between 2 large trees and covers it with a tarp. This creates a simple, drafty wilderness shelter. Afterward, he finds a piece of pine wood with resin, a great fire starter. He plans to build a campfire before dark. Back in Jackson's hometown, what was once a happy family of 5 faces a new challenge as his wife is pregnant again. To earn money for his unborn son's milk, he signs up for the competition. The fire tinder simply won't catch, no doubt due to the damp environment. Josh decides to familiarize himself with the terrain and look for dry tinder. Shortly after, he finds a half-eaten salmon, a bad sign indicating the presence of many predators. Just then, he spots a cave on the mountain, clearly a black bear's den. Thinking of his nearby shelter, Josh becomes extremely uneasy. Just as he decides to return to camp, a noise from above startles him. The camera zooms in to see a black bear eyeing him. This frightens Josh immensely. Unexpectedly, another bear is spotted on a different tree. The start of the game is thrilling, and Josh runs back to camp without looking back. Joe, the season's second contestant, lands in a swampy area. His primary task is to quickly find dry ground to set up shelter. Back in Ontario, Joe is a dedicated father who joined the competition to provide for his daughter's education and improve his family's life. After searching in the woods for most of the day, he finds a small clearing. The bad news is that it's next to an animal trail frequently used by large animals. With no better options, Joe builds a simple A-frame shelter using ropes and a tarp, hoping it will keep him safe through the night. The chubby man chopping wood is named Chris. He just arrived here and set a survival goal of 90 days, nearly losing his life in the process. Back in Florida, Chris runs a farm, but has never encountered real predators in the wild. He joined this competition primarily to test his mental toughness. After great effort, he chopped down a log and urgently needed to start a fire, as neither jackals nor bears could harm him then. However, when he tried to light the fire, he discovered the tinder wouldn't catch. Without a fire, he was at risk of danger at any moment. The fourth contestant, Mickey, collected a handful of small sea snails on his first day here. Although not enough to fill him, they provided more protein than a pound of beef. With the tide still low, he hurried to find some relatively dry firewood. On the way back to camp, encountering this fellow in the wilderness could be dangerous, so Mickey quickly returned to camp with the firewood, shaved some dry wood shavings with a knife, and started a fire using dry grass. Back in Massachusetts, Mickey often went camping with his family. Each time he made a campfire in front of his daughter, he felt unprecedented pride. He joined the competition mainly to provide a better life for his daughter. After rubbing the flint several times, the tinder ignited effortlessly. He then enjoyed a meal of collected mussels, which were perfectly seasoned and provided substantial energy. However, just as he was full and ready to rest, he heard wolves howling outside the camp. Back to Josh, he nearly wet himself at noon when he encountered 2 black bears and has since been too scared to enter the forest again. After wandering by the lake for half an hour, he unsurprisingly found more bear tracks. As dusk fell, Josh hadn't even had any hot water to drink. To safely make it through the night, he bravely entered his shelter. The creature's large, bright eyes suggested it was large, scaring Josh immensely. He immediately grabbed an axe in self-defense. The black bear, realizing the threat, carefully scoped out the tent with its brother. The wild bears, unaccustomed to such a situation, turned and ran, terrified. It was a truly horrifying experience, ensuring a sleepless, fearful night for Josh. By the next morning, Josh immediately called the show's producers. His speed of quitting was unmatched. Facing questions from the search and rescue team, Josh felt no regret. After all, last night's experience was unforgettable for a lifetime. At this point, he didn't care about others' opinions. He blamed the bear dens all around his starting point. a challenge anyone would struggle with. As Josh was packing to leave, even the black bear came out to see him off, seemingly sad about his departure. That same night, Chris also couldn't sleep. The howling wolves outside heightened his anxiety. Already fearful of large predators, facing this situation on his first day was tough. Barely making it to the third day, Chris called the producers right after getting up. Facing skepticism from the rescue team, he shared his childhood trauma and fear of wolves and grizzly bears. He hadn't expected to quit so soon. After all, his family depended on him back home, and he didn't want to risk his life. He quickly packed his bags and took a boat home. Now, 8 contestants remained. Lucas, the man wearing a red cap, had sewn eyes on the back of his hat to prevent mountain lion attacks from behind, hoping to confuse them and delay his demise. From Iowa, Lucas was an outdoor survival instructor and studied survival skills with friends. His family had high hopes for him in this competition, aiming to win $500,000 to get married. Entering a small grove, he decided to build a luxurious shelter. He collected a lot of logs, secured them with ropes, built the basic frame, and covered it with a waterproof tarp to complete his makeshift wilderness villa. To avoid getting cold at night, he made a mattress from spruce branches. After setting everything up, he hoped to survive the night. Over to Sam, who was making a simple water storage container by chiseling a large hole in the middle of a log and covering it with a waterproof tarp, ready to collect rainwater. From Las Vegas, an error had made him a father at 22. To earn money for his unborn child's formula, he joined the competition at his wife's repeated suggestion. Sam planned to build his shelter by the lake, a location with a broad view to keep an eye on the surroundings. After building the basic frame, he covered it with the usual waterproof tarp, hoping the strong winds wouldn't blow it away. The 7th contestant to appear is named Vinny. He is trying to start a fire in this desolate place by scraping some dry tinder with a small knife, and he experiments with it using some collected dry grass. Despite rubbing the fire stick dozens of times, the tinder just won't ignite. In St. John's, Vinny has his own weapons collection room. He often enjoys crafting primitive stone tools and has made many beautifully shaped daggers. His craftsmanship far surpasses that of his neighbor, Desi. After 49 minutes of friction, the tinder finally emits blue smoke. With a fire source now available, Vinny immediately goes to the river to boil a pot of water. Whether or not it can replenish protein, he starts with a few sips of boiled water to warm his stomach. Arriving at Alan's place, in search of a suitable campsite, he runs around the mountain several times. Not only is he completely soaked, but he also burns hundreds of calories unnecessarily. At a small stream, he fills a large pot with water. Without a fire source, he risks drinking the raw water to quench his thirst. Alan lives with his wife in the suburbs, leading an ordinary life together. Considering the $500,000 prize for winning the competition, he entered to buy a farm near his hometown. After wandering around a small forest, Alan finds an unusually large slug, a rare delicacy in the wild. Without a second thought, he cooks it in a pot. Just minutes later, he eagerly enjoys the taste, despite its bitterness, knowing it provides more protein than beef. On Mickey's end, it's already the 3rd day. He has been relying on collected rainwater for drinking. His campsite, surrounded by no sign of water, leaves him worried about dehydration. Thus, today's task is to explore the surroundings. After walking several hundred meters along the ridge, the dry ground resembles a desert, and he can't find water anywhere. Just as Mickey is about to give up in the afternoon, he suddenly hears the sound of water from across the lake. Drawing on years of wilderness experience, he concludes there must be fresh water there, but getting across becomes a major problem. He sits and thinks for half an hour, collects a bunch of tender branches, and wraps them tightly in a waterproof cloth, creating a makeshift floating device. Stripping down, he pulls the small boat into the water. Fortunately, the buoyancy is effective, eliminating the risk of falling into the water. Carefully, he finally reaches the opposite shore of the lake, and as expected, there is a wild stream with fresh water. Mickey decides to move his campsite there. It takes about 2.5 hours to move everything before dark. While there's still a little light, he hurries to set up shelter. He constructs a simple triangular frame and covers it with waterproof cloth to prevent getting wet from heavy rain. After a busy day, Mickey boils himself some water, and the day's fatigue seems to vanish. Now, he can finally rest. The camera shifts to Joe. Due to continuous rain in recent days, the moist environment has prevented him from starting a fire. He went to the riverbank hoping to find some protein, but was almost scared out of his wits when he turned around and saw a huge bear, weighing hundreds of pounds, foraging on the opposite bank. It hadn't noticed him yet. Surprisingly, Joe greeted the bear, which quickly became alert. Unthreatened, the bear continued towards Joe's camp. Frightened, Joe rushed back to his camp, not wanting a midnight visit from the bear. Considering this, Joe packed up and walked along the river for half an hour. He found a flat area by the sea, rich with seafood, solving his protein concerns. Exhausted from the day, he planned to treat himself well. By the fourth day, Joe woke up to find his flint missing, likely lost while making fire the day before. After searching for 2.5 hours, he still couldn't find it. Despite the previous day's campfire still burning, Joe impulsively called the show's crew. As the helicopter arrived, the rescue team was incredulous. On camera, Joe disregarded others' opinions. Perhaps unprepared, a small mistake led him to quit. He packed his belongings and contentedly boarded the helicopter home. Over to Vinny, he found a seabird lying breathless by the lake early in the morning. While others might have considered it food, eating an animal with an unknown cause of death was risky. Not feeling hungry, Vinny thought it too risky and threw it back into the lake. By the fourth day, he still hadn't found a suitable place to build a shelter. The area where he stayed the previous days was now uninhabitable due to high tide, forcing Vinny to search for a new living place. After circling the mountain, he finally found a good spot. However, the animal trails suggested it was frequented by black bears. Most people would have left, but Vinny thought differently. He believed that building a shelter there would make the bear give up its territory. But was this really the case? While the other contestants were preparing to rest, Vinny was alone, scouting the camp. Suddenly, he came face to face with a black bear, which terrified him. He ran back to camp without looking back, thinking he'd be safe once inside his shelter. However, it wasn't long before sounds of branches breaking surrounded him, and a pair of shiny eyes appeared outside the camp. Vinny immediately called the show's crew. Since helicopters and boats couldn't reach at night, the rescue team had to drive through the night, ensuring Vinny's safety via walkie-talkie while speeding towards the forest. Meanwhile, the bear had found Vinny's shelter and was cautiously exploring this foreign intruder. Terrified, Vinny was cowering and trembling inside the shelter. As the rescue team approached on foot, armed with bear spray, they lost contact with Vinny for over an hour, fearing the worst. But as they reached the shore, they saw a bright flare in the distance, Vinny's signal. It was a close call, and both parties felt much relieved. Winning the competition no longer mattered. Vinny just wanted to go home and leave this dreadful place. Finally, under the guidance of the rescue team, he successfully withdrew from the challenge, leaving 6 contestants. The 9th contestant, Brent, has been disheveled since arriving in this desolate wilderness. Considering the time and effort needed to make fire and boil water, he has been using sphagnum moss to filter raw water, believing it effectively removed impurities. After gulping down a large mouthful, he felt immediately energized. Brent, a veteran, had undergone professional military training over decades. He joined this competition to prove himself in this environment. The last contestant to appear is named Das. He found a fresh seaweed on the beach, shaved it with a knife, and threw it directly into his mouth. The taste was neither salty nor bland, but crunchy. The calories were at least 10 times that of beef. Back in Pennsylvania, Das and his wife lived a happy life. Since they had no children yet, they decided to travel abroad immediately. Thus, Das wanted to sign up and give it a try. Seeing a cypress washed ashore, Das decided to move it back to camp first. It might come in handy. However, he underestimated the log's weight. Already lacking extra strength, he decided to leave it and reconsider later. Over at Alan's side, he hadn't replenished his protein for several days. His stomach was already starving. After a quick inspection around the lake, he found lots of wild seaweed. Perhaps out of sheer hunger, he picked it up and ate it without hesitation. How was the taste? Although low in calories, it was better than an empty stomach. Alan marked the days on a stick with his knife, each notch representing a day. He hoped to last 80 days and would be satisfied. Coming to Lucas, he had been chopping trees these days, wanting to build a wilderness mansion here. For him, as long as he lived well and enjoyed himself, the result of the competition didn't matter. But looking at his small frame, even chopping a log was a great effort. He feared he wouldn't survive the mansion law. After chopping more than a dozen trees, he was too tired. He could only sit down and rest for a while, recalling the clay he found by the river. He planned to use it to make a fireplace, which would provide good insulation even if the temperature dropped. But today's tasks ended here, and other matters would wait until tomorrow. Over at Mickey's, to get better shots, he had to carry 40 pounds of filming equipment back and forth by the river every day. The huge energy expenditure made him feel hungry from time to time. Seeing the eagles perched on the branches, Mickey concluded they often fished in this area. The remains of fish by the river also proved this. Without a doubt, the river in front of him definitely had delicious fish. So, he immediately took out his net and began setting it up around him, hoping to enjoy a feast by tomorrow night. Lucas also found something good on the other side. Out exploring with his gear, he stumbled upon a bunch of chicken of the woods mushrooms. This delicacy was a rare find in the wilderness. His meals for the next few days were temporarily secured. While others sought protein sources, Alan chewed seaweed right at his doorstep. As long as he wasn't hungry, that was enough for him. Mickey, anticipating extinguished fires at night, boiled a pot of water. Using a small knife, he shaved birch bark into fibers, placed them in an iron box with fish hooks, and roasted it in the fire. Once the organic fibers carbonized, he had a box of dry tinder. To test its effectiveness, Mickey quickly struck his flint, and the tinder easily ignited. This relieved his future fire-starting worries. Brant, possibly from drinking unboiled water in the morning, couldn't sleep at all at night due to continuous stomach cramps. The discomfort made it impossible to lie down, and he endured until daylight. Still feeling unwell, he dragged himself upstream to check the water, nearly vomiting at the sight of rotten fish surrounding the water. Realizing he had drunk such water days before, Brant felt like dying. Back at camp, calming himself, he suspected he had ingested parasites. Despite the playful nature of the competition, risking his life wasn't worth it. Without hesitation, he called the production team. Upon their arrival, they confirmed his request to quit the competition. He insisted he was ill, packed up, and quickly left the contest. Hungry Mickey decided to check the net he set up. Expecting a catch, he found seaweed tangled in the net, but moving forward, discovered a large white salmon weighing over 10 pounds. Lucky to have a feast that night, and to prevent a cougar attack, he swiftly returned to camp. He started a large fire, processed the fish, and wrapped the fatty meat in wood sticks and bark. He cooked it until golden and crispy. The fish, tender, sweet, and crunchy, was full of protein, far exceeding that of beef. However, as he enjoyed the meal, noise from the camp's outskirts startled him. Spotting an adult cougar just 3 meters from camp, it vanished into the jungle at the sound. Alarmed, Mickey quickly grabbed his dagger and bear spray, hoping to safely make it through the night. It was the morning of day 7. Thankfully, the cougar from last night did not follow. Otherwise, the outcome could have been bad. Realizing his shelter was too flimsy, Mickey planned to reinforce it today. Daz hadn't eaten anything nutritious here. He spent his days sitting by the shore, feeling the cold wind, and watching otters eat in the middle of the lake. Sadly, they were too far from the shore to reach. He continued to collect trash along the shore, taking everything usable and unusable back to camp. Along the way, he found some good items, like a pallet perfect for a bed base, which he decided to take immediately. Lucas, as usual, he spotted a small island across the lake and came up with a bold idea to build a sturdy boat. This would give him an additional way to hunt. As the storm grew fiercer, the terrible weather made hunting impossible. Most contestants hid in their shelters to rest. The continuous hurricane and heavy rain soaked half of Sam's shelter. He just hoped to get through the night. Das sat shivering in his shelter, experiencing such torment for the first time in his life. Surrounded only by cameras, the feeling of loneliness in the wilderness began to overwhelm him. By midnight, this feeling intensified. Das just wanted to return to the warmth and comfort of his bedroom. He managed to endure until the morning of the 8th day, when he saw a small yacht from the production team on the lake. Das finally called the production team. Rather than continue suffering here, he preferred to pack up and go home. By day 8, only 4 contestants remained. To replenish protein, Sam went to the shore early in the morning to catch crabs. He had seen many small crabs in this area in the previous days, which were crucial for his daily energy. After half an hour of hard work, he gathered 33 small crabs. With a daily need of 3, he wouldn't worry about food for the next 10 days. Eagerly, he quickly set up to cook them over the fire. Lucas